Hi there. Where'd you come from? I'm Amy, and this is Jen. Or maybe this is Jen. I don't know which way you're seeing her, actually. But we're from Successful Single and Not Willing to Settle, where we show amazing women how to find their perfect match by showcasing and embracing their authenticity. So tonight, we're going to talk about the fact that into all times of lull, but especially
Yes.
coronavirus, when things tend to like slow down, right? And we're kind of like, what do I do with myself? This feels uneasy. I don't know what to do with myself. Backsliding happens.
Yeah, this is sort of the World Series of potential backsliding time, but I'm like in my head I'm thinking like, okay, like Hurricane Sandy, that would have been like a backsliding opportunity. Or even just winter when it gets cold, people will sometimes want to hibernate. And they might kind of do that, or just anytime someone's going through something personal in their lives and they want to reach back, whether for nostalgic reasons or just, you know, thinking they can rewrite the past maybe in some way, they might do that. And what we mean by that is like reaching back out to those exes or old flames to like rekindle something, um, and see if there's still a spark, or see if the same two people that might have ended a relationship could come back together and have a completely different outcome
Right. And it might
this
not
time
even
around.
be for that. It might just be because in that moment you are uncomfortable and you want something familiar and cozy. And we're going to
Yes.
tell you why in those moments you're probably better off finding like a fleece blanket. Um, but first, the why
A
is
mug
gonna
of cocoa.
warm. Yes. Um, reach out to a safe friend. How about that? So we feel this way. It's interesting when you think about like the places where we feel like this. So right when things, it's whenever we have it's actually when we have energy. It's kind of like almost like a nervous energy, and we don't know where to put it. It's like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And
Hmm.
that's why also people tend to do this, like reach they drunk text exes, because like it's like not enough is happening right now, but I'm like I have alcohol in my system and I need something to be happening, but nothing is happening. So what do I do? I start texting my like ex, right?
Yeah.
So this is like an elongated period of that where you should expect to feel kind of these ups and downs emotionally. We're all feeling them. And we want to talk about why the reasons to try to avoid, and if you've done it already, don't worry.
Yeah. No judgment.
No judge. We're not judging you. We've all done it. So but we're here to tell you just to stock up some beliefs of the reasons why it there may be better options, and you may want to do other things with your time other than reaching out to an ex. Okay, so we're going
Yeah.
to start off with why we tend to backslide, and then slide into oh, no pun intended, and then forward slide into how not to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, what to do instead. So why shouldn't we backslide?
It's, this kind of ties into why we do it, is also the reason why we shouldn't do it. So a lot of times we're doing it because, like you said, we might have some like pent up energy or some store of emotion that we want to sort of, you know, exhaust or get out there. But oftentimes what we think might be the outcome is not what we will probably experience. So if we're thinking that this will be a good cure for loneliness, like right now, a lot of us are stuck inside our homes. If we live alone and we just got over a breakup, then you know that feeling of loneliness is not comfortable. So the idea of, well, I could reach back out and then I maybe wouldn't feel so alone, or I wouldn't feel so uncomfortable. But more than likely, you know, there's a reason that the two of you ended things, and this might actually bring up some of those negative emotions again.
Right.
So whatever you felt at the end of that relationship, or whatever may have been the cause of the dissolution, that's potentially just going to reflood you. So if it was anger, if it was guilt, if it was betrayal, if it was feeling like inadequacy, you know, whatever it was, there's a potential that you're reopening like that Pandora's box.
Yes. Yeah, because this didn't change him. You know, he's
Or
the
the
same,
relationship.
right. It's the same
Yeah.
relationship. It's the same interaction as it was before. And there was a reason that the relationship ended. So staying solid in that in moments of weakness, which we will all have again, like we're all feeling this kind of like emotion without having the outlets that we're used to be able to expend that emotion, right? And another thing that it does is that it actually prevents us from leaving space open for something new to come in. You know, Jen and I just did a video about being open to virtual dating or meeting new people. And whether you're at that point right now to be ready to actually go out there and not out there virtually, but like out there and meet new people, or you're not really in that space because you have some growing or, you know, you time in order to get there. If you bring an ex back in, then you're actually stunting that growth. So even if it's alone time that you need or self-reflection that we're going to talk about in a little bit, he's now a distraction. It's like, you know, it's not helpful to have him around, but it feels maybe for a second better than having no one around. But you're actually, if we're thinking future, like where you want to be in like 6 months from now, by bringing them back in, you're slowing down your process from getting to where you want to go.
Right. And if the relationship ended in a negative way for whatever reason, not only are you, you know, potentially pushing back your clock to wherever you left it, you're not progressing, but also it might be doubly difficult to get over because you've now done it twice.
Yes.
And then there's that feeling of like disappointment in yourself down the road that you walked back into something that you knew might not actually be positive for you.
And there's time involved, right? So we've talked about the biological clock that women have been strapped to. And with that, you know, everything, a lot of women we speak to deal with things in this like projected timeline, right? And we have these little stories, and this is part of the like working through this kind of stuff with yourself before you even go out there. But if you have a timeline somewhere in your head of like, I've got to date for this long to meet a guy, to get in a relationship, to get married, to have this particular life that I want to have or whatever, and now you're slowing down the process, it then also makes it harder to hear your brain and your emotions telling you to leave again. Because now you've invested more time with this guy, right? You're actually opening up a potential for being like, well, now I've invested 3 years instead of 2.5 years. And like, you know,
the games you play with yourself become that much more like high stakes.
Yeah. And you start thinking, we only do one of two things. We run away from pain or towards pleasure. So if the pain of being alone in your mind is greater than the pain of just like sticking with this guy who you already walked away from, you're going to stick with him, and then you're building more and more time. And then guess what? The pain of walking away and starting over increases. So we don't want to spend more time than we need in a relationship to determine that it's just not the right relationship. The other thing is that because you can't, in our current situation, actually physically have the physical connection that you had with him, right? The person you're backsliding to, you're also getting a false sense of the relationship to some extent, because it's probably going to involve more texting or whatever. And depending on however it worked, you might get what you want for the moment. He might be more attentive, or he might give really good texts, we say. But it does not mean, if he, like, say the issue was that he was not available for you physically in the way that you wanted him to be, that hasn't changed yet. And even if his texting has changed because now he has more time because he literally can't go anywhere, it doesn't mean that when the the distractions of our life come back, that he's going to prioritize you in the way that you wanted to be prioritized, because there's really no evidence in this setting to prove that there's a change there. So even if you're getting some clues, you're like, well, I backslid, but he seems like he's a different guy. It's important to question whether or not those changes are circumstantial because of the present situation that we're in, or if he's actually changed, like he's had some sort of awakening and has clearly stated that he's going to change the things that were not working before, and that you too feel like, it's not always about him, he needs to change. Like, it just doesn't work if it doesn't work. So we're kind of making generalizations because we obviously don't know who you're backsliding to. We don't know the reasons that you left. And that's where your work is going to come in when we talk about how not to backslide. But generally speaking, questioning whether or not it feels better now because of the circumstances we're in, or if it's something that's going to be lasting, is really important for you to look into.
Yeah, I think even going into the sort of the communication in the relationship is going to be different. More than likely, you're going to both be in your separate homes or apartments. We wouldn't recommend that you go be together in the same one just for the health and safety issues. But also, because that's what you are resorting to, phone and text, you're more likely to slide back into old habits as well, in terms of conversation. So in terms of how you two communicate, if there was a tinge of passive aggressiveness from either of you, the possibility of sliding back into that same routine is very possible. Or I think we all know how easy it is to be sarcastic in a text or in an email and then have the other person not understand it. The relationship is potentially fraught with this person because there was a breakup. So the idea that these comments or jokes could be made and there would be some ambiguity of like, well, what does that mean? Well, how am I supposed to take that? Well, how am I supposed to interpret that? The possibility of that is so much higher in this kind of a situation when you don't see each other face to face and you don't have the physical contact that sometimes allows you to understand, oh, they're joking and they mean that in a loving way, not in a acerbic way.
Yeah, and to clarify, so like, again, the implication of backsliding, but it's like figuratively kind of showing up, sliding back into a situation. So there's more of like a, hey, how's it going? And then you guys start talking. It's not like I sat down and thought about the way things are. This situation that we're in made me think about a lot of stuff and I feel differently. That's a potentially different conversation. And even what Jen just said, like, some people I believe are potentially in a situation, if you have not already, and again, no judgment, where you've backslid and then to not be alone are now cohabitating with somebody who you previously ended things with. And if that's going great for you, then great. We've talked about this before. Our recommendation would be to be careful, because then you're like jumping light years into like a living together situation without having worked out the things in the setting of what potentially caused some of those issues.
Well, and there's no break. Like, you don't get to go out with your girlfriends for brunch and take like a pause from it.
Yeah.
It's sort of, you're immersed in it all the time.
Yeah.
If you two have chosen to cohabitate. So that would make it challenging as well.
Yeah. And it's very hard to tell whether or not you've worked through and moved forward from whatever the issues were before, because our situation is so different. Kind of like, not to
Love is Blind.
Love is Blind as like a reference, but kind of like Love is Blind. Like they could not foresee what issues they would have while in the pods, or even really in Mexico, because they didn't have jobs. They just were like hanging out. It looks very different than when life starts moving.